The story starts with a car crash. Someone asks if they should save their boss. The guy tries to reanimate her, but he's not sure if he really wants her to wake up. She made him work insane hours, so maybe this is just karma. Still, he thinks saving her might earn him some good points. He leans closer to her lips when suddenly a golden light falls from the sky and enters her body. He grumbles that if she dies, he won't even know who to complain to, but also admits her lips are softer than he expected. She suddenly opens her eyes. He blushes as she stares at him, asking if he's looking to die. A system message appears, saying he startled the Empress and gained divine appearance. The protagonist is confused about the voice when a leg comes at him. Instead of just kicking, she tortures him in a cruel way. He escapes using jujitsu and runs from this terrifying boss. She yells that he'll face divine punishment, while he shouts back, saying she only fainted because she hit her head, and asks what's going on. Lin notices something strange. She can't use her true energy. Our boy is being crushed mercilessly and tells her she should really go to the hospital, completely lost, wondering where she is and why all her energy has vanished. Time skips to the protagonist's place. He comes home from another exhausting day and just wants to rest. He finds his chubby friend lounging around and asks if there's any food left. The friend only teases, asking if the evil boss drained him dry. But suddenly, he freezes and drops the can he's holding. Confused, the protagonist asks what's going on. That's when the boss walks right into the house, looking around and asking if this tiny cage is what he calls an apartment. The protagonist demands to know why she's there, while the chubby friend whispers that he should at least warn him before bringing a girl over. The boss doesn't care and warns that if he's not careful, he'll suffer divine punishment. Then she suddenly grabs Louis's hand and tells him to come with her. Seeing her covered in blood with torn clothes, the chubby friend assumes they're up to something forbidden. Outside, our boy complains that even if he's her subordinate, she can't just show up and cut into his rest time like this. But Lin calmly says that from what he's saying, he seems to be her disciple. She explains she's an empress from the underworld, who cultivated for over 3,000 years to ascend to the realm of humans and gods. That's why she wants to know where they are and why her innate energy is gone. Louis stares at her, thinking she must be crazy. But then again, he's not exactly normal either. He mentions that ever since Earth emerged, there have been rumors about cultivators. It's super rare, and as far as he knows, both of them are just regular people. But then she suddenly reaches out, like she's about to strangle him. He panics, begging her to calm down. Lin steps closer and says he doesn't have the aura of the Justice Alliance. Our boy backs away from this crazy woman, but behind the trees, 3 shady guys whisper if she's really the one they're after. One of them says they need to make it look like a simple robbery. Lin instantly senses them spying and declares they deserve divine punishment. The 3 wannabe criminals step out, surprised she caught them so fast. When Yui sees energy gathering in one of their hands, he wonders why cultivators are after him. One of the men says it's a pity, but the kid saw what he shouldn't and lunges at him, yelling for him to go to hell. That's when the golden shield he got earlier activates, blasting them against the trees. They're stunned, asking how that's even possible. The system voice appears again, saying that because he caused damage, he'll receive some beginner cultivation packs. Yui is confused by all these voices, while Lin coldly says she needs to teach her disciple to never let an enemy escape alive. She calls the attackers insects and finishes them off with a single kick that makes one of them vanish, saying sometimes raw strength is all you need. Meanwhile, Yui realizes the system is real and somehow linked to this strange woman who he's sure is not someone to mess with. Back home, his friend decides to give the apartment to Yui for the night and crash at an internet cafe, warning him to keep it down or the landlord will complain. The friend mutters he can't believe Yui brought this woman home, and honestly, Yui is thinking the same thing. He tells her to come in and make herself comfortable, apologizing for the mess. She sits down, saying she doesn't care about trivial stuff, even though her disciples are usually strict about it. Yui goes to the fridge and asks her what this business is about being an empress who crossed worlds. If this is truly possession, then what happened to Lin Mia's body? She explains that she was in the middle of a tribulation to evolve when she got caught in a battle with the Justice Alliance. Suddenly, in the midst of the fight, she ended up here powerless. Yui says she's constantly mentioning this alliance and asks if by chance they are enemies. The Empress responds that those guys are a bunch of hypocrites pretending to be righteous, but are utterly disgusting, and since they want to fight her, they deserve to be turned into a river of blood. Yui, standing by the fridge, thinks this woman sounds more like a terrorist. He then gives her a glass of water to drink. She tells him to take a look at how this world works. He explains that in his world, There are things like magic and extremely advanced technology. The boss watches some Lolitas performing magic. She seems impressed by the power until Yui shows her spaceships blowing up planets. He warns her to be careful because there are people in this world who could destroy her and the entire planet with a flick of a finger. Staring at the images, she asks if that's really possible. He confirms it, saying she needs to understand that personal cultivation won't stand a chance against these forces. That's why she should never harm anyone, or the consequences could be very serious. She suddenly stands up and says, "The energy in his world seems very scarce." She places her hand on his forehead and says that the boy's aptitude is one of the best she's ever encountered. Yui suspects it must be something related to that system. Lin explains that if he were in her world in 300 years, he would reach an extremely high realm. Suddenly, his phone rings. He answers it while thinking all he ever wanted in life was to be an ordinary worker and make a little money. It turns out to be one of his colleagues saying that if the bugs aren't fixed by tonight, he doesn't even need to show up at the office tomorrow. Frustrated, Yui says he's not an artificial intelligence that doesn't need rest. Even Lin comments that working so late is no different from slavery. She mentions that in her world, once a bridge repairman did something similar, so she cut him into pieces. Yui is confused because she mentioned it so naturally. She then says that for something as simple as that, she was called a murderer, which doesn't make any sense to her. Turning around with a smile, she says it doesn't matter because those guys can't defeat her. Yui thinks to himself that she doesn't seem like such a bad person. He says she's at least a dystopian warrior, someone who fights for what's right. He then asks if her phone is still working because it's essential for daily life. She reaches into her pocket and questions if it's really that important, since she doesn't feel anything magical about it. She hands him the device, asking if that's what he means. The protagonist says that this expensive phone is really good because after the car accident, it's still intact. He then grabs her wrist, saying that now he'll show her how to use it. He takes her fingerprint, touches the screen, and explains that this is how you unlock a phone. However, Lin turns red, calling him a pervert who needs to be punished. In the next scene, a delivery arrives for him. The boss asks why the air smells so spicy. He invites her to eat some meat with him, and she watches curiously. She puts a piece in her mouth, gets startled, and says it's much less dangerous than she imagined. She comments that the meat feels like a dragon's breath. She asks if people really eat something like this, and he asks if they don't have anything similar in her world. She explains that they do use spices there, but nothing as spicy as this. He smiles and says it's amazing how different civilizations can be. He picks up what seems to be a Coke, and says that even though it looks like poison, it'll help with the flavor, and it's quite tasty. He takes a sip to show it's not poison, and she drinks after him. However, she seems not to like it, leaning back and saying it gave her a strange sensation in her mouth and a tingling in her stomach. He warns her to be careful, because if she drinks it all at once, she'll burp. Apparently, she burped. She says it has a bitter and sweet taste at the same time, which is very good. She imagines her disciples warning her about poison, but she replies that they shouldn't be afraid, because this poison will only temper her body. By temper, she doesn't mean to grow stronger, and the disciples are all happy. He asks if it's really that good. She explains she was just reminiscing about some good stories from the sect. As he's about to put the food away, she grabs his arm, saying he doesn't need to worry because she'll develop tolerance. Yui warns her to be careful because toxins can accumulate. Excited, she says that an empress can't be afraid of something so simple. She takes another bite, but in the next scene, she's claiming it's not that spicy after all. A while later, in her peculiar way, she asks what his favorite drink is. Meanwhile, he's telling her to stop being stubborn. His phone rings again and he answers it. Obviously, it's another scolding from his boss asking why he hasn't fixed the bugs yet. The boss warns that if it's not done by tomorrow morning, he might as well never return. But Yui is confident since this guy answers to Miss Lin. He looks over and sees her. Even though the soul isn't the same, the body is. The scene shifts to the next day. Yui explains how everything works in the world. She responds that she already understands the elevator is a kind of staircase that moves on its own. The protagonist praises her and reminds her that everyone will call her Boss Lin. She assures him she understands and tells him not to worry. However, as the elevator doors open, a blonde guy walks in complaining that Xiaokiki is so cruel. He approaches her and says he heard about the accident, but is glad to see she's doing so well. He offers her the special breakfast he made just for her. At that moment, she turns to Yui and asks who this person is. He explains it's a guy named Gu Xiong, her former suitor. He's the son of the building's owner and everyone thinks he's an idiot. The blonde guy turns to Yui and tells him that next time, he better leave her alone in the elevator since someone as smelly as him shouldn't be near her. But he's completely ignored as Yui suggests they hurry to the office. A chubby guy comes running saying it's good that the boss has finally arrived. He advises her to fire Yui because yesterday he didn't finish the work and only badmouthed her. Yui leans into Lin's ear and tells her it was this guy who kept calling him in the middle of the night. Lin turns to the man and says that, as far as she knows, the one ruining her reputation is him. The man, embarrassed, says he would never do such a thing, and insists Yui must have lied to her. She then says that she spent the whole night with Yui, so she knows very well who's lying. The blonde guy is utterly confused by this situation. The protagonist realizes she just poured gasoline on the fire, but the system detects that he shocked some nearby people and grants him a few martial arts skills. The scene shifts to the president's office. Yui tells her not to worry because getting through this lodging won't be difficult for him. As soon as he accesses it, he'll know exactly where she lives, and then she can go home. However, the Empress asks why he's helping so much. As far as she knows, the previous owner of the body wasn't very kind to him. Yui replies that he's a good young man who loves helping others, but in reality he knows that if he commands the Empress, he'll basically be an emperor. Plus, it'll be great to see that chubby guy get what he deserves. And finally, he can't abandon her to die after what happened yesterday. She remembers being attacked and asks what this business about dying is, but Yui completely ignores her and says the food the blonde guy brought is really good. He brings over the dish and asks if she wants some more. However, she remembers yesterday's spicy food and says that red dish must be too fiery. She rolls to the side, refusing to eat it. Sometime later, they leave the room and the chubby guy is holding 3 buckets, asking if he hasn't been punished enough. But she responds that he should already be happy to be alive. If he complains one more time, he'll earn 10 more hours on the clock. Shannon then approaches and asks why Yui was in her office. He warns her to be careful because that guy is poor, unrefined, and stinky. The Empress glares at him. Shannon apologizes, wondering why she's giving him that look. Yui then thanks her, saying that breakfast was delicious. He walks away with the boss, saying they have private matters to handle. Shannon obviously wants to know what those matters are. Yui remembers that he needs to shock people to earn system bonuses, while Shellman thinks Yui will have to pay for what he's doing. The scene shifts to a luxurious neighborhood at the Shanshire mansion. Yui compliments the Empress, saying she's getting the hang of using a phone. The door opens and she says adapting to the new world comes naturally to her. Upon entering, the protagonist comments that the house is as luxurious as he expected. He talks about the kitchen appliances and says he'll teach her how to use them later, but she says there's no need since she's never cooked in her life. He then shows her the bathroom, and she remarks how strange it is to do all hygienic tasks in the same place. He explains how to use the toilet, shows her the shower, and she says she'll take a bath. She tells him to fetch some clothes, as she's sure the body's previous owner must have left some behind. As soon as Yui opens the wardrobe, he sees the hanging clothes. He remarks that he didn't expect the former boss to be this kind of person. He picks out some clothes, thinking at least he doesn't have to worry about whether they'll fit since it's the right person. Meanwhile, the Empress is in the bath, asking if he's prepared everything because she's about to catch a cold. Yui's concern, however, is something else. How is he going to teach her to wear modern clothes? He hands them to her and tells her to look at pictures and not put them on the wrong way. She retorts that he should stop nagging because she's not that dumb. Despite the questionable design, the only thing she finds strange is that this string is considered clothing. Meanwhile, Yui is in the living room watching TV. He calls her to watch a historical documentary. He plans to explain everything about human evolution and the creation of industries. She sits beside him, saying she's curious. However, some time passes and she's already asleep. The protagonist gets annoyed that she claimed to be interested but didn't last 10 minutes. He goes to cover her with a blanket, but she seems to sense that something slashes at it. Staying the blanket here, he's confused, especially since she's still asleep. Slowly, he moves a sheet of paper closer to her, and she slashes at it again. He is shocked that she has such a sharp alert system even while sleeping. He decides to move farther away since it seems a bit dangerous while she's asleep. He sits down and starts checking out the items he received from the system. Then he begins practicing one of the fist techniques he obtained. The name Heavenly Fist of Dal sounded very pretentious. He assumes a few combat stances and feels as though his body is burning. His chest tightens and his heart feels like it's about to explode. She approaches him and says that if he continues at this pace, he'll eventually die. She doesn't know exactly what he's doing, but the better the technique, the riskier it is. Even though he has talent, his foundation is very weak, which just stresses her out. Essentially, he's too weak. The poor guy feels crushed. She says that now that she's had a little nap, she's full of energy. Yui was about to comment on her attacks when his phone rings. It's one of the bosses asking for help with some company files. The protagonist responds that he had taken Miss Lin home and would return to help soon. He tells her he'll try to come back at night, and she asks why he doesn't just stay by her side to help with the tedious tasks. However, he says that with great power comes great responsibility, and he needs to ensure the company doesn't fall into chaos. He then heads to the door, saying there's no reason to make life harder when she's calm, but she tells him to stop and comes closer. He's about to ask why when she steps even closer. Yui asks if this isn't a little inappropriate. She flicks his forehead and tells him to forget it and leave. The poor guy is left confused. Before closing the door, though, he says he'll order some deliveries for her, but asks her not to scare people. She reflects that now, without innate energy, she can't transmit her consciousness anymore. The protagonist has worked all day, and it's finally time to go home. The Sadama of the office calls him president and suggests he treat everyone to dinner. The boy asks what this president thing is all about. Sadama jokes that they all know he's close to President Lin. Yui tells them to stop exaggerating. He explains to everyone that she had a car accident, and he just happened to be nearby and helped her. If he really had something going on with her, he wouldn't be stuck there doing overtime. Nearby, Shaman overhears everything. He thinks this explains it all. It was just a coincidence. There's no way a loser like him could get close to Ms. Lin. Back at the mansion, we see the president when someone asks why the lights are off. The Empress turns with anger and says he'll have to face the consequences. However, the protagonist ostensibly places food on the table and asks what's wrong. She freezes for a second before devouring everything, commenting that he should have brought it earlier. Shortly after, she's calmer and says that food without spice feels a bit bland. He tosses the leftovers in the trash, muttering that it's really hard to understand her. Lin then shows him her phone and says this thing must have something against her. She tried to order food with 2 taps, so why doesn't it work for her? He sits down and takes a look, showing her that she needs to scan her face to make a payment. While she's fiddling with the phone, he cleans the table, explaining that this is how money transfers work in this world. While tidying up, he notices some sheets of paper with meditation techniques written on them. He asks Lin if she can read that sort of thing, but the Empress reveals that she's the one who wrote it. He's shocked, and she remarks that of course she still knows how to use paper and a pen. The meditation technique integrates the body, energy, essence, and soul. It would help him grow strong enough to start learning some techniques. The boy feels embarrassed. He never imagined she'd go to such lengths for him. However, she winks and says there are conditions for him to accept her method. He has to practice the way she dictates. That's because natural talent alone isn't enough. He'll have 3 weeks to master the first chapter, or he'll disappear because she doesn't keep lazy people around. Navi's trembling and awkwardly asks how long it usually takes disciples to master this. She says it's normally 4 weeks, but since he's talented, it won't be a problem for him. He starts reading a few pages about energy and pulse. It's about the circulation of energy rhythm returning to its true nature. Meanwhile, she wants a bite of something sweet and refreshing she's eating. She tells him he should eat first before practicing, but Yuvi is already spitting blue fires, saying he feels like his body has become lighter. The Empress is impressed that he mastered the first technique in just a few breaths. Even he's confused, asking if he really mastered it. But the Empress, now sitting on the counter, tells him that being able to gather energy proves he has. She tells him to breathe again and try to accumulate power. The boy looks like a vacuum, pulling in all the energy from the environment. Even she gets startled, asking what kind of monster he is. For impressing the Empress once again, he receives the instant step ability. He starts to think that every time he impresses her, her expectations will rise, making it harder and harder. As much as she was a good sheep, there's a limit to how much wool he can shear. She asks why he's laughing, and he replies that it's nothing. Then he asks if she has any other instructions because he wants to get back to practicing. She says yes and mentions they have a very important problem. He asks what it is, and she wants to know why there's no Coke in the house. The poor guy is confused. Later he says teaching her to use delivery apps at this moment is dangerous, but she's already drinking her Coke, saying she feels amazing. As he's leaving, she says there's something else she needs to remind him of. He should be more cautious because she's seen countless prodigies fall due to arrogance. He must always remember that there are mountains beyond mountains. But in the middle of her lecture, she suddenly starts hiccuping uncontrollably. She covers her mouth and says this body is strangely fragile. He leaves, saying he warned her not to drink so quickly. She tells him to disappear or she'll finish him off. He responds that she should know that if she keeps drinking that, she'll get diabetes and cavities. The Empress asks if she shouldn't drink it, and he slams the door, saying it's better not to. With that, she relaxes, saying she finally has a little peace. But from outside, he shouts, reminding her not to forget that his number is first on the contact list. The Empress reflects that in her past world, everyone feared her. It's been a long time since she had someone care about her this much. Yui is back home, wondering where his brother has gone. He decides to flop on the couch since the day was exhausting, and opens up that little game of his. He checks the group chat with his friends who are talking about getting a good score. Yui asks to play, but suddenly, everyone claims to have stomach aches and wants to leave. Apparently, Yui is one of those players who sinks the team, which is why no one wants to play with him. But someone called Old Maniac says he'll be in town soon, and asks if Yui wants to grab a meal tomorrow. Yui accepts and gets all excited. It reflects that he's been playing with Old Maniac for 3 or 4 years, but has never met him in person. Meanwhile, in his surveillance room, someone comments that they disappeared into a strange neighborhood. A bald guy says they went there to investigate, but there were no remains of the bodies. Another person replies not to worry because they already found a way to deal with that child. The next day, Yui is messaging his friend, saying he's waiting for him to arrive, all while thinking about the food he ordered. Then someone approaches. Is it Old Maniac? What's going on? Has the game flipped? Are girls now pretending to be old men? Yui tells the young woman that the table is already reserved. He starts to think she works for the bar and comments on how competitive the beverage market has become. But then she smiles and says she is Old Maniac. She shows their chat history, startling Yui. Feeling awkward, he asks if she's sure, pointing out that her voice sounds very different. The girl explains that people think she's very gullible and easily tricked, which is why she prefers to pretend to be an old man online. She says the one who introduced her was someone named Ling Ji, her sister. Yui comments that now it makes sense why he sometimes heard a woman's voice on Old Maniac's microphone. Feeling awkward, she asks him to stop calling her that and says her name is Xiao Tu and she'll be living in this city for a while. Later, by a lake, he asks if she isn't afraid of him since she came alone. She says he's overthinking because she feels safe. Having trained since childhood, she's confident she can handle 3 or 5 guys on her own. Our boy says he understands, but he's still not used to the fact that his online friend turned out to be such a beautiful girl. She gets flustered, asking if he's talking about her and starts lightly hitting a wall, telling him not to say such things without thinking. However, the girl is so strong that she causes the structure to collapse. She rushes to save him, and he thinks that dying like this wouldn't be so bad. And with that, she falls right on top of him. How many ribs broke? 1, 2, 3, 4. 5 of his ribs. She apologizes, explaining that she has a special physique with superhuman strength and dense bones. She never imagined that falling on him would cause so much damage. Our boy prepares a technique and tells her to calm down, assuring her he can handle it. He reflects that it's a good thing he practiced those techniques, or he would have definitely died. Then her phone buzzes with a message, and she says her first request has finally arrived. She shows him an app called Exiaxion and asks if he's familiar with it. He asks if it's the app where you can post missions for cultivators and warriors to duel over. After completing the mission, they earn the offered reward and accumulate hero points. She confirms and says her ultimate dream is to become the greatest heroine of all. She then shows him the mission, which is to take down someone who stole another man's girlfriend. She shows him the phone and he says, a bastard like that deserves to die. But then she asks why the target looks so much like him. Without hesitation, she almost slashes his head off. He dodges and tells her to calm down, insisting he'd never do something like that. But she ignores him and says, since it's her first mission, she can't fail, so he better stop dodging. She goes for a kick, but he sidesteps and asks why she's trying to kill her friend like this. Motivated, she just tells him to stop dodging and turn into the hero point she needs. He dodges again, and she seems puzzled by how he's always avoiding her attacks. The protagonist thinks that in his life, no woman ever comes easy. But since she wants to do things this way, he won't hold back. He uses instant step to appear behind her and prepares to use the Dao fist, almost blowing her away. She realizes she made a mistake trying to kill this guy. With that, she gets scared and he earns the soul shock technique. This ability stuns the opponent, making them obey him for a while. Xiaoxu says her grandfather always told her that China has many hidden dragons, and now she sees there's no way she can defeat him. Yubi tries to comfort her, saying not to worry because he's also been training since childhood. He says he only won because he caught her off guard, but she says she doesn't believe that, pointing out that the way he dodged her attacks was strange. She says she'll need to check him out, and he asks what she means by that. She starts poking his body, saying that if he's been training since childhood, there should be some marks. She lifts his shirt, telling him not to resist because he doesn't have a choice. Later, she asks what's going on, because he's only been practicing for 3 months. He admits he thought the abilities he learned were special, but never imagined they'd be this powerful. Of course, we know he's only been practicing for 3 days, but he decides not to tell her that. Xiaoxu says with such talent, she can't wait to see what her grandfather thinks of him. Yubi asks if she can figure out who was trying to kill him, and assures her that she can trust he believes in true love and would never be disloyal. She says it's not possible to directly see who sent it, but she can try to set up a meeting. The scene shifts to a van parked on the street with some men stepping out. A guy with gold earrings asks if the girl managed to complete her mission. Xiaoxu says yes, and he can do whatever he wants with the boy. Meanwhile, our protagonist finds it odd since he's never seen these people before. The man congratulates Xiaoxu, saying she'll get a 5-star review. At that moment, Yubi asks the man if he's made a mistake since they've never met, but the man asks if Yubi has already forgotten him after using him. Then he orders his men to take Yubi down. 2 more guys show up carrying something suspicious. The man with the earrings says that today they'll take everything from the boy. One of them says he's handsome, so they'll enjoy doing whatever they want with with him. Yui quickly realizes that either these people are acting in bad faith or they're being manipulated. He decides this is the perfect moment to use the technique he just acquired. He activates the soul shock technique and orders them to find out who sent the mission and deal with them instead. Xiaoxu asks if he's just going to let those people go. He replies that for now, it's the best solution. On the way home, she says she wanted to spend more time with him today, but unfortunately, she's getting calls and needs to leave. The protagonist says since she'll be staying in the city for a while, they can meet again later. She waves goodbye, saying they'll see each other soon. He watches as she gets scolded by her sister, wondering what his other friends will think when they find out the old maniac is a girl. Just then, he gets a call on his phone and remarks that she's finally learned to use the device. He answers and jokes that if she's been kidnapped, she should cuff twice. But the Empress responds that using a communication artifact is easy for her. She bluntly states that she wants him to accompany her to buy some clothes. In the next frame, they've already arrived at the store, and Yui is handing money to the taxi driver for the trouble Lin caused. When he suggested they stop a taxi, she kicked one of them, saying she was just following his instructions. He sighs and says whatever, then asks why she suddenly wants to buy so many clothes. She replies that she doesn't feel like wearing someone else's clothes forever. The store clerk asks if he's there to buy clothes for his girlfriend. Yui knows this is a sales tactic to charge more later and clarifies that he's just there to carry her bags. Some guys nearby comment that it's impossible for someone like him to be getting a beauty like her. The clerk brings out a light dress, saying she'll love it, and then shows a Gucci jacket, claiming it never goes out of style. She asks Yui what the clerk is talking about. He explains that each outfit in his world is suited for different situations. She nods, saying she understands, and then asks if they have any tight latex outfits. The clerk looks awkward and asks what she's talking about. Confused, she looks at Yui and says she saw on his computer that he always searches for that kind of thing. Embarrassed, Yui tries to explain to the clerk that she means a superhero style, something strong-looking. That's why she mentioned latex. But the Empress says she only thought of wearing it because she assumed it was trendy since he always looked at it. But apparently, he doesn't want her to try it on. The nosy guys nearby are trying to figure out the relationship between the bag carrier and her. Meanwhile, Yui asks the clerk to bring something more appropriate. She agrees, and the Empress goes to change. She comes back wearing the outfit. The clerk immediately compliments her, saying she looks stunning. The Empress says it's similar to what she used to wear in her world and asks Yui what he thinks. The clerk explains it's from their vintage collection. She comments that she wanted something more classic and thinks it looks perfect. The Empress stands in front of the mirror and decides to buy it. Then she points to Yui, saying she'll pick something for him too. He's confused about why, but in the next scene, we see the protagonist looking almost exactly the same. No major changes. However, the Empress, who seems to grow more confident by the minute, tells Yui that he looks quite stylish. He asks why she insisted on buying something for him too. She explains that the Lin family sent a message about a banquet in a few days. She makes the payment and says she thought it would be a good opportunity to learn more about this world. That's why she invited him to accompany her here. But then the cashier says her account doesn't have enough balance. Yui finds this odd, considering the Lin family account should have unlimited funds. He then offers to pay for it himself. He knows he'll need to live frugally for 2 months, but he feels it's worth it. Except the total came to $38,000, and the boy is devastated. Later, she's trying another drink and comments that it's bland compared to Coke. Yui tells her he checked her account and noticed a large transfer to a public account. To resolve it, they could contact manager Zheng, but she says she's not particularly worried about money. He explains that money is quite valuable and questions if she truly doesn't care. She replies that if he's so concerned from now on, he'll manage her money. He's confused and asks how he's supposed to make his own money. That's when she says that all the money she has will also be his. He's immediately overjoyed considering her wealth, but realizes this means he'll belong to her from this moment on and can never escape. Blushing, he says he understands, but adds that there are still a few things to clarify. Suddenly, she looks to the side and remarks that those people have disappeared. Apparently, they were sharper than she expected. He mentions that he also felt like someone was watching them earlier, but thought it was just his imagination. She acknowledges his sharp instincts and tells him he can handle it if he wants. Meanwhile, in an alley, a bald man angrily asks why their plan is being canceled when it was almost complete. A man with brown hair says the boy was supposed to be eliminated because he witnessed Lin's car accident, but since she's alive, there's no reason to kill him anymore. The bald man, furious, asks if they won't avenge the 3 brothers they lost. The bespectacled man beside him says that issue will be dealt with sooner or later. Later at the company, a man hands over some papers saying Ms. Lin made some payments. Once those payments are reimbursed, they'll have the money. It only catches that the new contract requires a fresh signature, and he asks if Yui can handle it. The problem is that Yui isn't great with numbers. He remembers that the Empress said her money belongs to him now. He wishes that were true since it would make his life easier for the next 10 years. He tells the man to hand over the papers, and the man agrees. But then he piles on another stack, and then another, explaining that these are for upcoming contracts. The chubby man offers to help, commenting that there are indeed a lot of them, but Yui doesn't want to be tricked and decides it's better to handle it himself. He asks if he just needs to compare the orders in the system. The man confirms and leaves, saying to call if he needs help. Outside, Shannon asks how it went. The man responds that Yui doesn't trust him. The two laugh oddly, saying that's perfect. If the chubby guy had handled the files, he could have been blamed for any errors. But now that Yui is doing everything alone, he'll be the only one held accountable, especially since he doesn't realize the lists on his desk are all wrong. Obviously, that'll take him forever, and he'll still mess everything up. Shannon praises the man, saying he did a great job turning the tables. The chubby guy comments that since the company is going through a tough time, if Yui makes mistakes, he'll definitely be fired. Even if the president wants to keep him around, they can convene a shareholder meeting, and he'll inevitably be expelled. The blonde man says that as soon as they release the explicit video they recorded of Yui, he'll be ruined. But then the secretary appears, saying there's a group of people who want to talk to him. The men from the alley arrive, holding something dangerous in their hands. The secretary asks if he knows them. He says yes, so there's no need to worry, and he tells her not to interfere or call the police no matter what happens. She reassures him that she'll keep the secret. Shannon approaches the men and tells them to talk upstairs. Meanwhile, the secretary wonders what they're planning. As soon as the door closes, she hears a lot of strange noises. Shannon is shouting, saying that it won't fit in this space. The secretary thinks he might be in danger, but remembers he told her not to interrupt. Suddenly, a moan is heard from the room, and she comments to herself that the rich really know how to have fun. Back to Yui, the poor guy is exhausted. Nothing is adding up, and the system's data seems wrong. He decides to recalculate, convinced this time it'll work. Just then, his phone rings. It's the Empress, scolding him and demanding to know why he hasn't come home yet with food. Feeling awkward, he asks why she didn't just order delivery since it'll take him a while. But she warns him he has 1 minute to be at the door, or he'll get a beating. The scene shifts to a restaurant. The Empress comments that the food in this world isn't bad at all. Yui asks if she wants to try some pork intestine noodles. She immediately refuses, so he questions why she hasn't mastered the delivery app yet, or maybe she has and just wanted to eat with him. Out of nowhere, she chokes but quickly changes her expression, claiming there were too many options on the app so she couldn't decide. He says he understands, and she sits down asking how work was today. He explains that he was reviewing some financial papers, but nothing was working out. She suggests it might have been a lack of focus, but he insists manager Jang must have messed something up. He smiles and says they should eat first since the food is delicious. Suddenly, a bald man at a nearby table shouts that he's sure this isn't pork intestine. Yui is startled, wondering why the man didn't mention this earlier. The Empress looks confused. Yui watches as the restaurant manager approaches and asks the bald man why he's shouting. The man insists that this clearly isn't intestine. The manager tells him to stop defaming the restaurant without evidence. The Empress asks Yui where he's going as the bald man threatens to shut the place down. That's when Yui steps in, places a hand on the man's shoulder, and asks the manager if the bald man's claim is true. He picks up the troublemaker and warns that he'll need compensation for spending his money there. The manager denies any wrongdoing, but Yui, trying to get a confession, says the food tasted odd and threatens to beat the man if he doesn't come clean. Finally, the cook admits that the intestines are made from fermented beans. Naturally, everyone demands their money back. When Yui sits back down, the Empress remarks that in her kingdom, the manager would face divine punishment. But she finishes her meal and says at least her order tasted good, so they'll let it slide. The protagonist pieces things together, realizing that Jang might be substituting genuine products with something cheap to deceive him. The next day, Yui is back at the office. Jang approaches and asks if he finished the documents. Yui replies that he has and already sent them to the investors. Suddenly, Jang exclaims that this is terrible news. He apologizes, claiming he made a mistake. He forgot to update the supplier list and used old pricing. He shouts for everyone to hear that if Yui signed and sent those documents, the company will lose millions. Some other employees join in, saying this will impact the entire company. Xiamen shows up, asking what mistake Yui made this time. However, it seems Xiamen had a rough night. He's visibly in pain, clutching his lower back. Zhang asks if he's okay. Our boy just smiles, saying he's curious about all this commotion. Xiamen then says that because of Yui's mistake, no one in the company will get their bonus this month. The rest of the employees get angry, saying they were counting on that bonus. The blonde man says that since Yui is now the president's representative, he'll have to explain this to everyone. Yui then reveals that all the contracts had been sent with the correct prices, so there's nothing to worry about. Xiamen looks confused by this no-problem claim. Yui shares the numbers, telling them to take a look. When Zhang checks, he confirms that the numbers are indeed correct. Yui then points out that Zhang's mistake almost cost everyone their bonus, so it's only fair that he provides an explanation. Embarrassed, Zhang admits he made a big mistake, but thanks to brother Liu, the company avoided a major loss. Xiaomen interjects, saying that although Zhang made an error, no real harm was done. That's when Yui stands up and says Master Xiaonan doesn't seem to be feeling too well. He places a hand on Xiaonan's shoulder, shoves him into a chair, and tells him to sit for a moment. Yui adds that he's more curious about why all the company's money is in Xiaonan's account. Employees shout, saying now it makes sense why their bonuses have been disappearing. Xiaonan tries to lie, claiming he has no idea where the money went and that he wouldn't even invest in this company if it weren't for President Lin, but Yui just tells him to stop lying. Cornered, Xiaonan admits he remembers now. It was Zhang who transferred money from his account because he needed. He insists they just need to talk to Zhang to get the money back. Yai remarks that it's great to see his friend Xiaonan repenting for his mistakes and exposing the cowards, but Xiaonan, seething with rage, mutters that he wants to kill this damn guy. Meanwhile, the employees grab their keyboards. Yui tells them they know what to do. Naturally, the manager gets beaten up with everyone shouting that this is why they always have to do overtime. Our boy then gets a message from the Empress, who, as usual, is starving. That's when he remembers that today is the Lin family banquet. The scene shifts to the Lin family mansion, where a man named Lin Wei is getting ready. He's the brother who previously tried to kill the Empress. A maid approaches him, informing him that the guests have arrived. Then the protagonist and the Empress appear. Yui comments that the place is truly a spectacle. However, she doesn't seem impressed and asks if the Lin family isn't supposed to be more prominent. Yui says that to him. The party seems very luxurious, but she retorts that she doesn't see a single can of Coke around. At that moment, Wei approaches the Empress and says their grandmother was worried she wouldn't attend. She completely ignores him. Confused, Wei asks why she's not speaking and why she's acting so distant toward her brother. Yui steps forward and explains that she hasn't been feeling well since the car accident. Wei asks who he is. The protagonist introduces himself as the president's assistant. Suddenly, Wei offers her a glass of wine and points out that the heads of Pan Industries and Fixu Industries are nearby. He suggests she go entertain them. With that, he leaves. The Empress asks Yui who that man is. He explains that in theory, he's supposed to be her brother, but he's not entirely sure. What he does know is that this guy is under 30 and already the head of the Lin family. The company she owns is just one branch of the family's holdings. The Empress says the place is boring and has an atmosphere she doesn't like. She then looks at the glass of wine and comments that at least it looks good. Before Yui can stop her, she drinks it all. Immediately, she asks if that was alcohol and why it's so strong. Yui explains that modern distillation techniques have improved a lot, so the alcohol is much stronger. She looks a bit disheartened, wishing for a Coke. Yui notices a blonde passing by with a tray and asks if there's any Coke around. She says no because high-end VIPs only drink this kind of cocktail. The two laugh, wondering what kind of bumpkin would want Coke at an event like this. One of them says not to say that. He might be someone important if he's attending this event, but the other replies that it's impossible and he's probably just a kid Ms. Lin brought along. After all, she's already heard rumors that Lin Mayok is expected to marry someone from the Pan family at this banquet. Now Yui understands why the Empress was invited to this. He notices that in the meantime, she's been called to a table. A man with purple hair says that the higher a woman climbs, the less she's worth. Another man sitting across from him says that's a harsh thing to say and suggests he drink instead. But the purple-haired man asks if he's wrong, saying a woman should focus on staying beautiful and finding a good husband. The other man asks if he has someone in mind. He replies that he's not very interested after seeing his father's 12th wife run off with his money. However, he mentions that his father is still strong, only 60 years old, and ready to have more kids. He tells the Empress that he's always advised his father that low-class women aren't worth it. But someone like her from the Lin family must have blood good for something. He places a ham on her shoulder and asks what she thinks of his offer. Meanwhile, Yui is worried since he knows everyone at this event is influential in the city. But seeing Lin angry, he decides he doesn't care about that. He grabs the idiot's arm and twists it. The man, panicking, asks if Yui knows who he is and demands to be let go. While Lin wonders what he's doing, Yui seizes the chance to shock everyone. The man breaks free and asks who Yui is and if he's lost his mind. Our boy introduces himself as Miss Lin's assistant and says he's doing the man a favor, but the man points at Yui and says if he doesn't explain himself properly, he'll have serious problems. Yui makes up a story about being a doctor and claims the man's wrist nerves were damaged. The man isn't that gullible though, and asks if that's how Yui plans to play it. He calls over his bodyguard and tells him to take care of this. He also tells everyone to watch and see what happens when someone messes with the Pan family. Yui tells him to stop stalling and come in already. The bodyguard charges at him, promising Yui will regret his words soon enough, but Yui easily dodges the first punch. He remarks that that while the man's boxing skills aren't refined, they're enough to deal with someone like this. With a punch to the face, the man bows down. Meanwhile, the Pan family man says the bodyguard was a level 3 cultivator. The people at the table murmur that someone that strong would stand out anywhere in Zhang City. So who exactly is this kid? With everyone shocked, Yui activates the system and receives a rejuvenation medicine. Then an elder from the Lin family shows up and asks Yui what's going on. Yui explains about the bodyguard fight, and the elder mutters that Miyake must be losing her mind. The Pan family man asks if this is how they treat their guests. The elder, visibly flustered, apologizes and promises they'll handle it. But the Pan family man simply says to forget about any alliance through marriage. Strangely, the Empress tells Yui she thinks she'll benefit from all this. Yui, startled, wonders if she knows about the system. Feeling awkward, he says he only did it because he doesn't like sexist comments. But the Empress isn't easily fooled and says she's certain there's more to it. Suddenly, the elder points at her and demands an explanation, accusing her of disrespecting the family. He claims they never cared about her lowly origins, raised her with difficulty, and gave her everything. So why is she repaying them like this? Lin turns to Yui and asks who this man is. Yui replies that he has no idea. He's probably just some random elder from the family. The man continues shouting, saying that the family is prominent but has been humiliated because of her, and she better apologize to the young master of the Pan family. Yui tells her to stay calm and that he'll handle it, but she ignores him and asks the uncle if they really consider themselves noble and elegant, because to her, they're just people without virtue, who only care about appearances. From the conversations she overheard, she'd already figured out they only cared about superficial fame and contributed nothing of real value. She continues her tirade, leaving the uncle speechless, but she asks if she said anything untrue. She adds that if they're waiting for her to apologize, they should save that request for her coffin. The humiliation is so great that the poor man collapses, hitting his head on the floor. The uncle gets up and says she must be losing her mind to say such things, but she simply states that if they'll excuse her, she's leaving. However, the uncle warns that everything given to her will be taken away, and she'll be expelled from the family. At that moment, another man nearby interjects, asking them to wait. He introduces himself to Yui and asks if he can get to know him better. Approaching Yui, he says he has remarkable skills and wants to know who his master is. The protagonist replies that the martial world is complex and diverse, and it's not convenient to delve into the details of his life. But then Wee steps in and tells the guests that having the support of a martial group like them would be excellent. He asks Yui to explain himself, who only says it's not that he doesn't want to. It's just that technically, he's never had a formal master. The best he can say is that he received some guidance from a few notable figures. Lin Wei calms everyone down, saying today isn't the time to discuss business. He just wants to know about Yui's relationship with Lin Miyake. He explains that until now, he's only ever seen her with one other person, but seeing her accompanied by such a talented young man reassures him as her brother. The men nearby mock Lin Wei, saying earlier he was ready to marry her off to anyone just to form alliances. The Empress says she's tired of all this chatter and that it's time to leave. The head outlaw Wei waves them off, saying he won't interfere any further. Suddenly, a waitress approaches, saying someone's phone is ringing, but Miyake notices something, points to the waitress, and tells her to come closer. She orders her to buy 5 cases of Coke, not just for her home, but for all the Lin family residences. Her brother looks confused, trying to figure out what she's doing. Miyake tells him to ask the waitress why she was whispering about the guests. Yui remembers it was the same waitress who called him poor earlier. To avoid losing his sister's favor, Wei immediately orders the waitress to fetch all the Coke, even if she has to go on foot. Later, they're at a street food stall, and Yui comments that there's nothing like a late-night snack. Holding her Coke, Miyake says it would be even better if it were cold. Yui offers her a beer, saying it pairs perfectly with the food here. She asks what it is, and he explains that it's an alcoholic beverage with different flavors. She tries it and says it's quite different from the drinks of her time, yet somehow similar to Coke. However, she makes it clear that she'd never trade Coke for this. The protagonist starts thinking that drinking from the same can would be an indirect kiss and rushes off, saying he'll grab a new straw. Meanwhile, she notices 2 men nearby threatening a young woman. They tell her she probably doesn't want her boyfriend to find out about this. Her family owes a lot of money, but if she comes with them, the debts can be cleared quickly. The Empress quietly observes. The woman protests, saying she doesn't want to. One man warns her she has no choice now. Another man begins pushing her, saying it'll be quick, until he gets a bottle smashed in his mouth. He falls to the ground and asks who it was. It was the Empress, who asks if he wasn't in the mood for a drink. The men approach, saying that the wretch is pretty bold, but watching her eat, one of them comments that drinking with her would actually be a good time. 10 seconds later, he's fleeing in desperation, calling for help. Everyone is beaten up and the poor guy is crying that the woman is a monster, but she steps on him and asks why he's leaving so soon. She says she was only going to press all of his meridians and drain his energy, or maybe force his body to accumulate internal energy until it exploded. The poor man is sobbing, saying he just wants to escape from her. Yui approaches and asks what they did to provoke her. She replies that it was nothing serious. She just wanted to teach him a lesson. Meanwhile, the school rule thanks them for saving her from the loan sharks. She explains to Yui that she was being threatened when his friend stepped in. The shop owner interrupts, wanting to know who will pay for the damage. Suddenly, the police arrive. As they start arresting the men, they accuse the woman of breaking everyone's bones. Yui knows this could cause problems and asks the girl if she can testify to what she just told him, but she runs off saying that if she does, her family will get into trouble. The Empress says it's no problem. Wu retorts that it's easy for her to say, but everyone else here will claim she's guilty. As the police approach, she explains that in situations like this, all they need to do is tell the truth. But Yui grabs her arm, saying that won't work this time, and bolts, yelling that if they stay, they'll be in big trouble. Meanwhile, the poor shopkeeper is left waiting for someone to pay him. Later, while resting on a bridge, Yui remarks that it's a good thing he practiced those techniques, otherwise he wouldn't have been able to run all that distance. He's convinced she wasn't the villain in this story, but thinks she needs to be more cautious. We then see a glimpse of the Empress's past. Yui explains that in his world, false accusations are commonly used to ruin people. Rumors are always a mix of truth and lies. Since she doesn't like explaining herself and has some ignorance about the world, she'll always end up in trouble. At the rate things are going, and with the problems she's causing, she'll become the villain of this world. She simply responds that she doesn't care and isn't very interested. Yui declares that from now on, he'll keep an eye on every word and action she takes. If necessary, he'll ensure she doesn't encounter any problems. Suddenly, the Empress throws herself onto Yui and asks if he wants to go with her to the world she came from. Blushing, Yui asks what she's talking about. She moves closer, grabs his face, and reveals that the true Empress's name is Kim Ying. In the next scene, they're entering Yui's house. He notices something blonde on the couch and wonders who it is, but as he gets closer, he's startled to find his friend left an inflatable doll on the sofa. He tells her to wait a moment while he cleans up the space. Later, she sits down, and he asks about calling her Kim Ying. The Empress explains that within her body, there's another soul connected to hers. So the body of Lin Miao contains the Empress's soul, but the Empress's soul is also linked to another one. Apparently, at this moment, that connected soul has taken over Kim Ying's place. She explains that because Lin drank alcohol, the connected soul was able to assume control. She grabs his face and says that if he can help Kim Ying, she'll owe him forever. She offers to pass all the knowledge she has on to him. Unlike the native witch that is the Empress, she claims to possess immense knowledge. Yui is still confused, trying to figure out where this lunatic is heading with this. He asks how he can help her. She says she needs help removing the seal on her shoulder. Grabbing his arm, she tells him she'll teach him the technique to remove it, or at least lessen its effects. Our boy says it's fine. He'll try to help, but she doesn't need to worry about paying him back in any way. He asks if all he needs to do is strike the seal with energy, and she says yes. Instead, he strikes her to see if she'll faint, muttering to himself that this body-swapping business is getting out of hand. The scene shifts to the Lin family knocking on the door of a house. A purple-haired woman answers, saying they should have received the message that the master wouldn't be showing up tonight. Lin Wei reassures her they won't take much of her time, explaining that Master Wang has arrived in the city and they've prepared a banquet. However, they notice that another elder didn't attend and got concerned he might have health issues. The woman says the master is fine and they don't need to worry. She closes the door in his face, leaving Lin Wei frustrated because he just wanted to deliver a message. The group rumbles that the old man is really complicating their lives. Lin Wei advises them to calm down, reminding them that no one in the city can oppose Master Wang. He leaves, urging them not to damage their relationship with the Wang family. The woman re-enters the house and tells the master she sent the visitors away. He thanks her, saying he could have met them, but preferred to spend time with his granddaughter. That granddaughter, Xiao Tu, asks why he's treating her like this. Her grandfather says it's because she kept talking about losing to a young man who had practiced far less than she had. She apologizes but insists that Yui is impressive and her grandfather will understand when he meets the boy. Back at Yui's house, the Empress remarks she never thought she'd have a day like this. Yui says it's thanks to modern alcohol. She notices a bruise on her forehead and asks what happened. He dodges the question, saying she must have accidentally hit her head somewhere. He hands her something to drink, joking that he didn't expect her to have such a low tolerance. She explains it's because she's experienced few things in this mortal body. As she goes to drink, Yui asks about the two personalities and the person named King Ming. The Empress spits out the drink and asks if he really met King Ming. Yui says yes and explains that the woman introduced herself as a spirit trapped in her body, seeking help to escape. The Empress confirms it's true. King Ming is a spirit she imprisoned in an artifact to continue strengthening it. Yui asks if she's serious and wonders how someone steals another person's spirit. The Empress explains it involves peeling the person's skin while they're still alive, extracting spinal fluid and using using endless torture to separate the soul from the body and seal it in an artifact. She then asks Yui if he regrets saving the wrong person. He relaxes and says no, he made the right choice. At least by helping her, he knows what she wants. But with King Ming, he has no clue what her intentions are. The Empress says he made a wise decision because if King Ming had awakened, she would have killed him. Yui wonders what she's talking about and why he feels like she's deceiving him. Now she complains about pain in her shoulder, and Yui, ever opportunistic, offers to give her a massage. But then his friend Wu walks in, sees the two, and accuses Yui of lying about working late when he's clearly home. Wu notices that Yui brought the Empress and immediately says he'll leave so they can have the place to themselves. However, he grabs Yui before leaving, asking if he's doing adult things in front of the doll on the couch. Yui shoves him away, telling him to stop leaving the inflatable doll lying around. The Empress, meanwhile, is calmly eating the food Wu brought. Wu asks if she's really Yui's boss. When Yui confirms it, Wu starts enthusiastically offering her things. He rummages in a drawer and asks her to wait a moment. Pulling out a suspicious bag, he says it contains some sweets he bought 3 days ago and wants to give them to her. Yui asks why Wu hid the sweets inside a dirty sock. The Empress watches them argue, saying it seems oddly familiar. Wu is on his knees pleading with Yui, saying he wants to attend a famous celebrity show tomorrow. The problem was that the tickets were sold out, but Wu knew she worked for the Lin Corporation. Yui tells him to stop following these internet celebrities, reminding him of the last time he maxed out his credit card, but Wu replies that Yui will never understand what true love is. He claims he supports her without expecting anything in return. Yui only responds that he knows his friend too well. Wu then shows a picture of the artist and promises not to worry. He'll make sure Wu gets a ticket. Sometime later, the Empress is writing some talismans. Wu asks if she's crazy, and Yui casually explains that she went to the Long Mountains and enjoys doing this. Mio cans him one and tells him to inject true energy into it, but Yui, being cautious, wants to know what it does first. She explains that it's something simple to help him gather more energy. Since he's about to advance, it could be very useful. He asks if the heavens will punish him for using it, and she replies that he's far from being important enough to attract that kind of attention. She then stands up and says she'll also cultivate as she can't afford to waste time. Yui thinks this is the perfect chance to go see internet celebrity with his friend. The next day, the event is happening. Zhang from work, the obvious scapegoat, was the one who got the tickets for Yui. He hands them over and leaves, telling Yui to have fun. Wu thanks him, calling him a true brother. At the venue, Yui asks what the event is about. Wu explains that it's to promote urban harming for a day, but he quickly adds that the actual event doesn't matter. What matters is what's on stage. The celebrity thanks everyone for supporting her so much. Wu asks Yui if she isn't the cutest thing he's ever seen. Yui agrees, but adds that a woman shouldn't rely solely on her looks. The girl overhears this and doesn't seem pleased. Then another man comes on stage and she says they must support all vendors and build a better city together. She takes off her sandal and walks for the man as if planning something sinister, saying that those who don't listen to advice deserve punishment. Wu naturally starts yelling that he wants to be punished too. The man on the ground seems to be enjoying himself, and Yui remarks that something about this is off. Suddenly, the man bites her foot, and the girl asks if he's not an actor. Yui flings him forward, saying he'll help him. The man continues devouring her foot until Wu crashes into him, telling him to back off. The two men exchange glares for a second before they both get punched in the face. The crowd rushes forward, yelling not to touch Yan Yan, but Yan Yan ignores everyone and approaches Yui, thanking him for helping in time. Emotional, she says that if it weren't for him, she doesn't know what would have happened. Wu, already smitten, murmurs that her charm is hard to resist. However, the people nearby notice someone else holding her hand and rush forward, telling Yui to let go. Yui tries to explain that something's wrong, but he also can't seem to let go. Yan Yan asks if she's stronger than he expected, while Yui wonders why she's messing with him. She finally releases his hand and says she's sure he can handle it, but Yui doesn't want to get involved in this madness and bolts. Later, he's in an alley, exhausted from running away from these lunatics. That's when a man in a suit appears, saying he's finally found him. Yui asks the man to be reasonable, explaining that he didn't do anything wrong. It's Yan Yan who's crazy, but before he can finish, the man nearly slashes his throat. Yui asks who he is, but the man is more interested in how Yui dodged the attack. Now he's convinced Yui is involved in the death of the old man's son. Yui realizes the man has the same energy as those who attacked him before. He charges at the man, using instant step to get behind him and landing a punch that sends him into the wall. Yui approaches, one hand in his pocket, and says he left him with a few intact ribs because he needs some information. Suddenly, Yui is nearly hit by a black orb and thrown back. A bald man appears and asks why Yui is so fast. 2 others show up behind him, saying it's better to eliminate them together and split the reward later. Yui isn't sure he can handle 3 opponents at once. Just then, Wu shows up, saying he's finally found him and thanks him for throwing him onto Yan Yan. But then Wu notices all the men surrounding them and asks if he arrived at the wrong time. The bald man replies, "No, you came at the perfect time." Wu is almost crushed, screaming for help and asking what's going on. Yui lands a hit on the bald man, but knows things just got harder since he now has to protect someone else. He tells Wu to run toward him, but 2 more men appear, declaring no one will leave alive. Suddenly, a cloud of smoke fills the air. In the confusion, one of the men accidentally knees his ally. He apologizes, and the other tells him to be careful. Looking around, they can't find where Yui and Wu went. Yan Yan suddenly appears and rescues Yui. A while later, they're all exhausted, and Yan Yan says this spot is safe enough. She explains that those men are from the Martial Legion, but wouldn't dare to pursue them here. Wu is sprawled on the ground, muttering that he can't believe he was saved by his goddess. Yubi introduces himself to Yan Yan and says he owes her a favor, but she simply asks him not to tell anyone about this because she doesn't want to gain a reputation. Wu, now smitten, wonders how he ever thought for a moment she might be a demon. Suddenly, Yan Yan changes her expression and asks if he can hear it. Yui asks, "Hear what?" She says, "Obviously it's the sound of your heartbeat." She explains that he was just saved by an adorable, modest girl with a good heart who asks for nothing in return. Surely you must be thinking she's perfect as a future wife. That's why his heart is racing. At that moment, Yui realizes this girl is insane. Later, at the park, Yui asks why, if she's so skilled, she didn't fight back against the guy on stage. She explains that it's company policy. She has to appear vulnerable and weak. That's the only way to be someone everyone wants to protect. Yu thinks to himself that his poor friend is always being deceived. He brushes it off and asks about the Martial Artists Legion. Yan Yan is surprised he doesn't know, and explains it's a group of assassins who, of course, use martial arts. They're a well-known underground organization, but if he wants to know more, he'll have to attend more of her events. She offers him a discount if he does. Shigen says she'll give him 20% off if he decides quickly. Too late. Yui is already back in the city, realizing he needs to grow stronger because of this strange legion. He remembers Miyoki mentioning he'll need a spiritual jade and decides to call her. She tells him to go to a jade shop, inject energy into the stones, and he'll know which one is spiritual. Before he can say more, she says she has to get back to her practice and hangs up. Yui remembers he earned a reward for shocking those guys in the alley. It seems to be a penetration technique, though he has no idea what that means. To test it, he uses it and looks at a woman, realizing it's a visual penetration technique that lets him see her skeleton. Unimpressed, he complains that the system seems to want to turn him into an orthopedic doctor. Later, the scene shifts to an antique market. Some men watch as Yui injects energy into jade pieces, purifying them in the process. The shopkeeper asks if he has some kind of jade fetish since he's drooling over them. Yui asks about the price. The shopkeeper praises his eye for quality and says that a piece of jade is worth 2 million. Awkwardly, Yui responds that the jade is still full of impurities, so he'll check out other places. As he leaves, he mutters that the guy robs customers more than a bank does. Suddenly, Xiaotu sees Yui and asks what he's doing there. He explains that he's searching for a jade amulet, and she says it's a coincidence as they are too. She introduces him to her grandfather, saying this is the guy she talked about the other day. Yui greets the old man, who introduces himself as Wang. Wang mentions he heard from Xiaotu about how strong Yui is and how he defeated her in a fight. For that reason, he'd like to invite Yui to a duel. However, Yui immediately wants to decline, saying the old man is exaggerating. Wang apologizes, saying he got curious and acted unpredictably. Xiaotu tells them they're leaving and says they can play when they get the chance. As Yui watches the old man walk away, Wang suddenly tries to punch him, but Yui is ready. Yui asks if Wang isn't too old to be using dirty tricks like this, while Xiaotu looks alarmed, asking what her grandfather is doing. Wang tears his shirt as his muscles swell, saying he won't let anyone steal his granddaughter's admiration. He tells Yui to prepare, as today he'll experience the strength of wisdom. They prepare briefly before Wang launches a flurry of punches at Yui. Xiaotu pleads with their grandfather to calm down, saying it's not that serious, but Yui replies that now he has to fight for his dignity. Wang compliments Yui's skills, but says he's still far from deserving Xiaotu's admiration. Xiaotu runs off, saying she'll have to find Sister Ling to stop this. Wang leaps at Yui, activating a flaming punch. Yui manages to block it, but struggles to find an opening for a counterattack. Then he remembers the penetration technique. As Wang closes in, asking if Yui can't keep up, Yui combines the penetration technique with a celestial fist and lands a punch squarely on Wang's weak spot. The combination of techniques works better than Yui expected, and the system congratulates congratulates him, unlocking the penetration fist. Yui charges at Wang, saying it's time for a counterattack. Wang grins, saying they'll settle this with a punch. Yui notices that Wang's weak spot is on his shoulder, but unfortunately Wang dodges. Wang mocks him, asking if he's running out of energy. Wang lands a solid hit on Yui's stomach, making him cough up blood and collapse. Wang dusts off his hands, saying Yui needs more practice. Sometime later, Yui wakes up wondering what happened. Looking to the side, he sees someone standing in front of him. It's the Empress, who comments that she didn't know he had the habit of sleeping on the streets. Yui asks why she's there, and she replies that she heard about a refining furnace nearby and thought he should take a look. She crouches in front of him, grabs his clothes, and he desperately asks what she's doing. She responds that fortunately he's not seriously injured, and adds that Wang's cultivation is the best she has seen there. Standing up, she advises him to take this as a lesson. He shouldn't go around picking fights without being strong enough for it. Struggling to get up, Yui says he was forced into the battle, and recalls that during the fight, he used the penetration technique and noticed an injury on Wang's shoulder. He says he stopped before hitting it directly, as that would have caused big trouble. Yui wonders if she is really worried about him. He reaches out to grab her hand, saying it's nothing serious, and suggesting they talk while walking. However, she asks him not to touch her since he's all dirty. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Wang is wondering where his little bunny went and smiles, accepting that the boy she introduced was indeed strong. He remembers that last punch from Yui, admitting it was dangerous. Laughing, he still says his abilities are superior, even though he feels immense pain in his left shoulder. At that moment, he hears Xiao Tu calling out to Sister Ling, saying they found him. Looking at the two, he thinks he should just pretend to be unconscious. Elsewhere, Gu is with a woman in a jade shop. She thanks him for helping her, hugs him, and says that at next week's party, she will be the most dazzling one. Gu replies, of course he would help since their families are close friends, but in his thoughts, he only thinks that if she wasn't going to deal with Yui, nobody would be her friend. The woman asks who the one who offended Gu is, and adds that she even went to his sister's house where she ate some dumplings while they chatted. Annoyed by her excessive closeness, Gu thinks this woman only cares about eating. A few minutes later, Yui arrives at the jade shop and says he will take one of the stones. He asks the seller to open it, and when he does, he discovers a massive jade inside. He explains that the last 3 stones Yui picked were all filled with jade. The people in the shop are confused, as the stones they choose never contain jade. Confident, Yui says buying jade there is very cost-effective. Looking at the stones on the counter, he thinks that by using his technique, he can do whatever he wants. He asks the Empress if the stones he chose are enough, and she replies they are already usable. He takes one of the stones and says she could use it as an accessory. Placing the stone near her, he comments that it suits her, and suggests she could make a pendant or something like that. Embarrassed, the Empress turns away, saying she doesn't use such things. Yui asks if she doesn't usually buy accessories, and she answers that it's not that, but she wouldn't wear something inferior and full of impurities. Yui remarks that having money is amazing. At that moment, the woman who was with Gu arrives at the place. Gu asks what's going on, and the excited shopkeeper says that the young man brought 2 rarities to the shop, imperial green and red emeralds. He turns to Yue and congratulates him for revealing these treasures in the store, which also boosts the shop's reputation. Sarcastically, Yue replies that he didn't expect such a place to belong to someone like Gu. This man gets furious hearing Yui speak like that, but he thinks it's rare for him to come there to pick a stone for his sister Xiao Kui, so he feels completely defeated this time. Xiao Qiu at that moment wonders if those imperial jades are more valuable than the necklace Gu gave her. She approaches Gu and asks if he knows those people. He replies that the guy annoys him everywhere. Then she says, so it's that guy, adding she didn't even need to look for him because Yui showed up right in front of her. Pointing her finger at him, she orders Yui to leave the jades and apologize to Gu to end this matter. Smirking, Yui says that when they were shopping, he thought Gu had some stomach problem because even the softest rice needs to be eaten in large amounts. He goes on saying he always respects people, but if they like that piece of jade so much, he'll pay 100 million for it. Annoyed, the woman asks if Yui is from out of town and came there to beg. At this point, Gu nods to his bodyguards, who approach Yui and say they won't hurt him, but Yui smiles confidently. With a single punch, he knocks both men out, leaving Gu terrified. Stuttering, Gu asks what Yui is going to do. Yui comments that he noticed Gu hasn't been in good condition lately and asks if his intestines are doing any better. Remembering that fateful day, Gu recalls he went to the doctor and had an infection but thought it was a private secret. Gu asks how Yui knows about this and if it had anything to do with him. Patting Gu on the belly, Yui says it's better to create traffic than a blockage. He then says that's enough advice and takes his leave. The Empress asks what Yui is doing. As they leave the shop, He says it was just a small detail and calls her to go with him. That pat from Yui triggered something in Gu's body. He bends over, clutching his stomach, saying it hurts. Xiao Q arrives behind him at that moment and asks if he's okay. He tries to tell her not to come closer, but it's too late. An explosion happens. Xiao Kui is covered by something hot and brown. Gu feels relieved at that moment, but poor Xiao Kui probably feels like she's in hell. Meanwhile, at the Wang mansion, Wang is being examined by a doctor. Xiao Tu is very worried about her grandfather's injury. The doctor says the flow of true energy was blocked, but using the 9 needles technique, Wang's life was saved. He explains that the shoulder injury is due to a chronic illness he's had for many years. Wang thanks him and says he knows his own body well and he's not dying yet. Sister Ling says she'll take care of him day and night. She turns to one of the servants and asks him to help the doctor settle in. Xiao Tu approaches her grandfather with tears in her eyes, and he asks why she pities him when he can still fight. At that moment, they feel the pressure of a sinister aura nearby. Ling asks if it's fun to go out picking fights. Wang says it's not exactly a fight but rather a matter of pride. She then asks if the head of the family passed out on the street over such a ridiculous reason. Wang tries to change the subject, but Ling insists, saying he's so carefree while she, in her 20s, was forced to become an old woman. Wang comments that with only 2 years left before she turns 30, she can't really call herself in her 20s anymore. Irritated, Ling tells him to take that back. At that moment, one of the butlers arrives, informing Ling that some families in the area heard about Wang's fall and came to visit. Ling believes this visit has ulterior motives. Wang asks her to go receive them and tell them he only hurt his hand while playing. Ling replies that these people are not young enough to believe that excuse anymore. Wang insists that Ling should go, and reluctantly she leaves to handle the situation. The butler comments that the boy who fought Wang showed up at the Jade Market. Xiao Tu asks her grandfather if Ling is going to attack Yui. He replies that the Wang family is stubborn from top to bottom, and there's no way to stop her from doing what she thinks must be done. He adds that in this case, Xiao Tu should quickly warn the boy and tell him to hide from Ling. Xiao Tu says she will call Yui right away. Meanwhile, in front of the Wang mansion, several people are speculating about what might have happened to Wang. One man comments that it seems the cooperation ended after the old man did that. Another man says he will quickly ally with the Liu family. A third man responds that Mr. Ma's conclusion is too hasty because they don't know Wang's real condition. He also adds that the Wang family's management is highly reputed. He continues, saying that the next head of the Wang family is just a cowardly teenager and that the Liu family was really suppressed once. Lin Wei thinks he shouldn't hang around with those idiots, but if the old Wang isn't well and the future head of the family is an inexperienced teenager, he intends to show goodwill and build a good relationship with her. One man introduces himself as Song A Liang and says he came to visit Wang because he heard he wasn't well, bringing medicine with him. He shouts, asking to be let in to see Wang. One of the men asks if that guy isn't from the Liu family. Another replies yes, but he doesn't understand why he's there, since the two families are openly at odds. One of the guards warns that no one can enter the family courtyard without an invitation. Liang asks them to let him in, but the guard questions what he's doing there. Lin Wei comments that Liang must be the head of the Liu family and came personally to see the truth about the Wang family. Liang walks toward the guards and asks if they don't want to save their master, as he brought life-saving medicine, but they still don't let him in. Frustrated, Liang calls his followers to help him break into Wang's house. He strikes one of the guards, saying this is the chance he's always wanted to uncover the truth for his master. Ling arrives in the middle of the chaos, charges one of her flaming punches, and attacks Liang directly, burning him completely despite his attempts to protect himself. Ling remarks that he's very bold to cause trouble there. Looking at her, Liang thinks she's stronger than the last time they met. He approaches and tries to justify himself, saying he heard Wang was sick and brought secret pills from his family to help, but Ling ignores him and tells the other men that Wang is fine. If they have nothing else to say, she tells them to leave. The two men exchange glances, and one asks what really happened to Wang and if they can visit him. She replies that he spent the night playing games and ended up injuring his hand. One of the men thinks this is probably a lame excuse, but says that if that's the case, fine. Another man says it's good that Wang is okay, but has one more issue to discuss. Ling tells him to speak, and he mentions the current financial problem. Another man says he hopes Ling will help them solve it, but in his thoughts, he just wants to enjoy the benefits guaranteed by the Liu family and stop messing with the dying old man. Ling replies that of course she will help, but lets them decide whether they want to stay or not. They say they're facing a difficult situation and will leave before the 7th. Ling replies that the master received the goods and will certainly reimburse them. As she turns around, she wonders if this is Wang's plan. Watching the men, she thinks that each of these Yui's families has malicious intentions and that temptation will keep them from restraining themselves. At that moment, Wang is explaining a few things to Xiao Tu. Wang says that those people who come to the Wang family will jump ship the moment they face any turbulence. In the future, when Xiao Tu has to deal with them, she'll know who she can truly count on. She asks if that's her grandfather's plan. He questions whether she thinks he's lived his whole life in vain, but admits to himself that, at first, pretending to faint seemed pointless, yet it ended up working in the end. As the men leave, Ling comments that Wang's injury is real, and that if the Lu family keeps taking advantage of this to attack them, it will be problematic. She believes Wang needs a true ally. Watching the other men, Leon says that based on the information they've gathered, he can take advantage of the old man's weakness today. He takes a pill he brought, places it in his mouth, and thinks those pills were made for him. A violet aura surrounds him, and he declares that even if he falls here, he will fight for his master Lu. Our protagonist arrives at the Wang mansion at that very moment. Leon tries to punch him, but he's repelled by a powerful golden bell shield. Yui wonders if he just knocked someone out. The voice of Wang is heard then, ordering them to let brother Lu through, as he is a personal guest. Confused, Yui asks if Wang wasn't seriously injured, and why he can hear his voice now. The men around are also puzzled, as it was unmistakably the voice of the old Wang. Once again, Wang shouts for them to let him in. Ling, surprised, wonders if this is also part of the old man's plan. Xiao Tu comes to get Yui, saying she has been waiting for him for a long time. Lin Wei recognizes the protagonist, while Ling asks if this Lu Wei is an ally of the Wang family. Meanwhile, at the municipal hospital, Xiao Kei lies in bed unconscious. Gu tries to speak with Mr. Lu about her condition, saying she's stable and that he'll leave first. This is Lu Fei, Xiao Kei's father. Enraged, he says that if he finds out who threw that on his daughter's face, he'll end that person. One of Lu Fei's men appears and reports that Leon said Wang is fine. Lu Fei comments that he knew there was something suspicious about that immortal old man. The man continues, saying no one was received except for someone named Lu Wei, who seems to be favored by them. Lu Fei responds that he's never heard of that guy. Gu, furious, snaps, saying that once again it's that Lu Wei. Lu Fei asks if Gu knows him. Back at the Wang mansion, Ling asks Yui to come in with her. Smiling, the protagonist says there's one more person to enter. Leon, who is still on the ground, says that only a storm could bring down a tree. He begins to stand, claiming that this small setback won't stop him from being loyal to Master Lu. However, someone suddenly falls on Leon, slamming him back into the ground. The Empress arrives at that moment and comments that it would be good to apply the body purification technique. She asks Yui how he dares to run off and leave so much dirt on his body. A few scenes earlier, Yui had run off, raising dust that fell on the Empress. Yui replies that he was just in a hurry. Something at that moment catches the Empress's attention. Ling looks at her and notices there's no visible trace of breathing, concluding that Lu Wei's formation might not be so simple. She turns to enter the room and comments that since she is a friend of the protagonist, she is also welcome. Inside the room, Xiao Tu tries to get to know the Empress and offers her some tea. However, something about the Empress intrigues her, and she wonders if that size is normal. The protagonist asks if Wang's injuries are okay, and adds that during their last fight, he noticed an injury on his shoulder. Smiling, Wang comments that the protagonist really has tricks up his sleeve. He asks if that failed punch was intentional, and tells Lu Wei not to worry because he's fine, and soon they'll be able to fight again. Xiao Tu asks if her grandfather's injury wasn't caused by Lu Wei. Relieved, she says she thought Sister Ling would take care of Lu. Ling then asks Xiao Tu if she thinks she's pretending nothing happened, just to stab the protagonist in the back later. Xiao Tu answers yes. Meanwhile, the Empress, who had stood up, observes the paintings on the walls. Yui asks Wang what those are. He replies that his family, the Wangs, are martial arts practitioners filled with illustrious generals. He stands and says that all those generals went to the battlefield and fought bravely to defend the country. Over the years, the Wang family gradually gained more power. Ling comments that even if people seem to respect him on the surface, they never dismiss the power of the Wang family. The protagonist then understands the bigger picture regarding the families. Ling thinks that allowing Xiao Tu to get close to Yui is also part of the old man's plan. Watching the two, she concludes that if Yui wants to join the family, he'll be welcome, and looking at him now, he seems like an honorable person. By faking the worsening of his condition, Wang managed to take advantage of the situation to manipulate many martial forces and test Yui's character. Ling concludes that Wang killed 3 birds with 1 stone and considers him him very cunning. Looking at Ling, Wang says it seems she has figured out his plan, but instead of 3 birds, he caught 4 at once. He then comments that these people are willing to accept anything, yet still enjoy dealing with little brother Lu. He adds that he and the protagonist could have more contact in the future. However, Yui senses there's something off about this whole situation. At that moment, Wang is already thinking about how to capture and control the protagonist later. In the end, he plans to win and still be thanked by Yui. Xiaotu asks her grandfather if he's planning to use Yui as bait. The Empress says that no one in a low position can afford to offend others, adding that no one has acted yet because the time wasn't right. Looking at the old Wang, she comments that after observing the situation in the courtyard earlier, she fears some people are looking for a chance to rebel. She turns to the old man and says that at that moment, everyone in the courtyard was asking for someone to be handed over. She asks if he really wants her to keep talking about this. Confused and surprised, Yui listens to the conversation while Ling thinks that in the future, many people will want to bring down the Wang family. Even if it's not a direct attack, it will inevitably happen. The protagonist reflects on everything he has learned and heard about the Wang family and their plan to use him as bait. Xiaotu asks her grandfather if this is really happening. The old man is shocked, wanting to know who this young woman is, and upon observing the Empress's grandeur, wonders why he feels so captivated and subdued by her. He felt so comfortable with her judgment of the situation that, in the end, he just wanted to thank her and bow. He says that the Empress is worried about Yui being a target and that the Wang family naturally won't sit idly by ignoring this. He then comments that if they both have more questions, they should go ahead. Xiaotu says Yui can feel free to ask her if he feels embarrassed. The protagonist reflects for a moment on the Wang family's martial arts heritage and asks the old man if he could make a copy of some of the family's exercises. The old man replies that there are some exercises that could be useful to Yui and will help him with martial arts training, but he stresses that he won't share the flaming fist technique, which is of utmost importance to the Wang family. Xiaotu stares at her grandfather, but he says begging won't change his mind. Yui understands and responds that some secondary techniques would be enough. The Empress comments that she really liked the trees and flowers in the Wang courtyard, and the old man explains that they have an ancient origin, offering to send her some seedlings if she wishes. However, she replies that she only wants some flowers and leaves from the trees for consumption, as she hasn't felt the aroma and taste they bring to food in a long time. Embarrassed, the protagonist comments that he already imagined she would say that. The old Wang then mentions that if Yui wants, he can visit a part of the mountain the family owns and even keep it. The Empress becomes excited and invites Yui to visit. The protagonist jokes, asking if she plans to eat the entire mountain. Wang says goodbye, promising to have some people make copies of the exercises and send them to Yui. The protagonist thanks him and says he'll visit when he has time. Ling, arms crossed, comments that some people think they have everything, but now the old man has lost his abilities and come down from the mountain. Xiaotu says it's time for her grandfather to change his habits. Tired, he replies that's enough and adds that he doesn't know the origin of that woman, but he's curious about what she intends to do with that tree. Meanwhile, at Yui's house, someone opens the door. His brother, who was watching a video of the latest celebrity, thinks it's Yui and asks him to help pay the rent the landlord is demanding. However, it isn't Yui, it's several men who had been watching from a distance. They rush in to capture him. One of the men asks if this is really the target, and another replies that he's just ordinary trash. Yui's brother asks who they're calling trash and threatens to take them all down, but one of the men orders to get rid of him. Feeling cornered with no way out, Yui's brother braces himself. Meanwhile, the protagonist and the Empress are heading toward the trees she wanted to see. Yui comments that there are so many trees there they could feed her for over a month. She asks if he really thought she wanted to eat the trees. Confused, he asks if that's not the case. Shrugging, she replies that she's not selfish enough to only think about herself and her stomach. Observing the quality of the trees in the courtyard while peeling off a piece of bark, she says she remembered some elixir recipes that use peach tree bark. These elixirs would greatly help with refining the body and chi. Confused, the protagonist asks if she hadn't said she wanted the flowers. She replies that was only a half-truth. The protagonist sits down and asks if she has a way to recover her own strength with those recipes. However, she answers that no matter how much she tries, she can't channel chi into this body, so unless there's a special situation, there's no hope for that. She adds that these elixirs are actually for him, surprising him. The Empress states she'll do everything she can to help him break through the heaven-human realm, and with that, asks him to take her back to her world. Confused, he reflects on the request and, looking at the sky, sighs, saying he had forgotten for a moment that she's not from this world. Excited, she responds that if the protagonist doesn't show up, how would the story unfold? She explains that both sides are preparing for a decisive battle that will last a century, and without his involvement, those alliance bastards wouldn't find it entertaining. Still doubtful, the protagonist asks if the gap between him and the heaven-human realm isn't enormous. He continues questioning whether she really believes he can do it. The Empress explains that the heaven-human realm is an existence that dominates the world and that very few have reached it. There are only rumors about them, and it's something completely different from what the protagonist is now. Irritated, he says that means his chances are over. The Empress steps closer, looks straight into his eyes, and says she believes in him wholeheartedly and that she's not wrong about this. She assures him that she'll help him reach the top of this world. Continuing, she says that breaking through the great void is merely a matter of choice. Fired up, the protagonist tells her to go ahead. At that moment, the Empress comments that the Sephora flowers are beautiful and suggests he pick some. The protagonist jokes, asking if she's still thinking about eating them. Sometime later, at the company where Yui works, they receive several gift boxes. The manager informs them that the pharmaceutical company Fangzhou sent the gifts and that it's all because of Yui's brother. One of the employees notices a new virtual reality device, not yet released to the market, among the gifts. Another employee asks director Lin Wei what Yui did to make them receive such presents and why so many companies are rushing to gift him. Lin Wei says they can ask Yui themselves when he returns. The secretary announces that Yui has arrived. Everyone greets the protagonist warmly, leaving him confused about the reason. At that moment, the shock system starts beeping repeatedly. Yui wonders what is going on. The manager asks Yui if he still doesn't know, then explains that several major companies in the city have sent him gifts. One of the employees hugs him and says they must have some mysterious connection. Watching from a distance, young Gu asks if Yui is trying to steal all the spotlight. The protagonist thinks for a moment and concludes that all this must be the influence of the Wang family. He then tells everyone that his work in recent days must have been more efficient, which is why other companies recognized him and asks them to choose their gifts. Everyone thanks Mr. and Mrs. Lin. Confident, Gu says that's right, everyone should thank the Lin family because Yui is just a stinky part-timer. He adds that even if Yui ends up with Miyauki, only he can call her by name, while Yui will have to call her Mrs. Lin. He finishes by saying that talking about this has finally restored his arrogance. Then Lin Wei invites Yui to visit the Lin family house more often, crushing Gu's confidence once again. Lin Wei announces that the new director position now belongs to the protagonist. Everyone is shocked by this unexpected promotion. Lin Wei continues, explaining that this is a position normally reserved for family members and asks the protagonist to feel like part of it. However, Yui can only think that the Lin family comes from their daughters way too quickly. Looking at the Empress, he reflects that the Lin family still hasn't realized that Mrs. Lin is no longer the same as she once was. Seeing the rewards he received from the system, Yui thinks it's better to store the elixirs he obtained. The Empress calls Yui to leave and he asks what she's doing. She explains she's trying to avoid the Lin family because even small, the buzzing of these flies is still annoying. Meanwhile, the employees only think about the benefits they'll receive with the protagonist's rise, and Gu throws himself to the ground, cursing him. Upon arriving at the president's office, the protagonist asks the Empress what else they need for alchemy. She quickly replies that only a few medicinal ingredients are missing, but suggests that for now, they should just have lunch. At that moment, the protagonist receives a call. His brother, desperate, asks for help, saying he was kidnapped and they demanded that the protagonist come there. Yui says he's not going, remembering that last time his brother called only to make him pay the bill with no money. Desperate, his brother assures him this time it's real, and even offers an important collection as a reward. Smiling, the protagonist jokes that of course he'll save him since he's his good brother. Outside the office, young Gu hears everything and thinks this is karma for offending the Liu family. Sometime later, in front of the Moon Bar, several waitresses serve drinks to customers. The protagonist's brother is tied up, facing a woman. She orders him to raise his head and look at her directly. Someone grabs his face and lifts it toward the woman, who extends her hand, emanating a neon pink glow. She asks if he remembers what happened when he met Jin. Hypnotized, he replies that he doesn't remember anything. The woman approves and asks him to answer her questions about a certain person. However, before he can start speaking, a waitress warns that Yui has arrived. The woman orders the waitress to keep him busy for a while, and the girl obeys. Meanwhile, the protagonist enters the bar with the Empress at his side. She comments that she respects how women wear fewer clothes in this world, but now they're showing too much. At that moment, a waitress approaches the protagonist, asks why he came with another woman, hugs him, and teases if he wants more excitement. The protagonist removes her hand from his arm and says, "This is annoying." He pulls off the wristband she's wearing, revealing it's a trick to hide a blade. He then asks where his brother is. Straightening her clothes, she asks if he's here to meet someone, and if so, they have many girls to serve them. At that moment, Lian and his lackeys approach the protagonist, saying that Lian's master is also interested in him and that they will eliminate him to end any chance of being replaced. One of the lackeys charges at the protagonist, but he quickly takes down several men almost at the same time. Without giving the enemies a chance to recover, the protagonist unleashes a powerful attack, blasting everyone away. Lian is furious and Liu Wei comments that a dog that only barks is useless to its master. The protagonist then turns to Leon, slams him to the ground, and asks once again where his brother is. Sarcastically, Leon asks if he's been watching too many movies, until a massive iron ball crashes into the ground where the protagonist was standing. The man who threw the ball asks if he can't just request the Liu family to wait 5 minutes. Looking at him, the protagonist mocks, asking if the man has some kind of feelings for him since he keeps chasing him so closely. Irritated, Leon gets up and asks the man why he didn't act while his men were being beaten. The man tells Leon not to talk nonsense and says he's no match for the protagonist. Leon then turns to attack the Empress, saying he'll deal with her first and shouting that begging for mercy is useless because today he'll end them all. However, before he can strike, the Empress grabs his arm midair. Facing him closely, she uses her full strength and throws him far away. The two men stare, stunned by what just happened. Smiling, the protagonist says that if Leon had chosen to fight him instead, the outcome wouldn't have been so pathetic. The Empress comments that since they're here to save someone, they should fight quickly and decisively. Terrified, the men beg her not to come any closer. She steps forward and says that if they have more tricks to show, they're welcome to use them because it'll be fun. However, the Empress suddenly feels something strange in her body and collapses, worrying the protagonist. She says she's feeling exhausted all of a sudden. At that moment, the bald man receives a message through his earpiece saying the effect may not last long, and he tells them to take advantage of the opportunity. The two men, staring at the protagonist and the Empress, comment that Yui should have been dead long ago. Looking around, the protagonist wonders if what happened to the Empress was caused by the green gas in the environment. The men start approaching, and he deduces the gas only affects the Empress. Picking her up in his arms, she blushes and asks what he's doing. Smiling, the protagonist tells her not to worry because this will be over soon. He sets her down on a nearby table, and she asks when it will be his turn to worry. The protagonist charges at the enemies, but the man dodges his direct attack quickly. One of them comments that they already knew something was off with the protagonist's techniques, so they came prepared this time. Frustrated, the protagonist tells him to stop talking nonsense and unleashes another powerful strike. Yet again, the enemies manage to dodge all his attacks. They begin circling rapidly around him, saying this is the result of their training. The protagonist thinks that the Yao Dao fist is the only technique he can use right now. The enemies, forming a kind of barrier around him, ask if he's angry or if he feels powerless. Suddenly, they leap at him while he stands in the middle. However, before their attacks land, the protagonist activates a golden bell shield. The enemies, caught off guard, are thrown back by the shield. Confident, the protagonist tells them to keep attacking as he channels his strength into the shield, blasting the enemies away. Lying on the ground, one of the men comments that Kun's soul has been destroyed. Smiling, the protagonist says they may have more techniques, but he's stronger than that. The woman observing the fight from the other side of the room wonders how he managed to use the golden bell at that moment. Yui then asks if there's anyone else left to fight, just as someone throws a grenade at his feet. The protagonist quickly grabs the Empress and runs as far as he can, but a massive smoke curtain rises, and the silhouette of the kidnapper appears within the mist. Looking at that figure, the protagonist says they're probably setting up a trap to make him chase them. The Empress, annoyed, asks when he's going to put her down, but Yui takes the chance to run even farther, carrying her. He sets her down near a staircase and asks if she has recovered, what that gas could be, and why it only affects her. The Empress replies that, by its smell, it seems very similar to a snake repellent. The protagonist is confused, so she explains that due to the trick she practiced years ago, she acquired the heart of a demonic serpent. That's why she was the only one affected by the gas. The protagonist tells her he's here to help her in this world. He asks who could be the other party involved, but she answers that it doesn't matter much who they are, as it's impossible to draw conclusions yet. The protagonist then suggests they go check who's in the other room. They return and interrogate Leon about what the Liu family is trying to do and what was in that green gas. Leon replies it has something to do with the warrior's body, but he has no idea what exactly. He adds that the Liu family's intention was to get rid of the Empress. Yui, confused, turns to her and asks why she's the target. Leon explains that a month ago, they were assigned the task of eliminating this woman. He continues saying that he checked the location that day, but later his boss said the job wasn't done cleanly because the woman was still alive. The protagonist then remembers that a month ago, there was an accident involving his boss. He concludes that the Liu family's wife is targeting Lin Miaoki of this world. The Empress adds that the only ones who know her are those in the warrior army. The protagonist asks if Leon's boss is coming. Leon replies that he's only responsible for the service and doesn't interfere in the Liu family's matters, concluding he doesn't know anything else. Suddenly, the protagonist strikes Leon and turns to the Empress, saying they already know what to do and calls her to head straight to the Liu family. The protagonist's brother watching from afar, says he knew his brother would come to save him. But when he stands up, he sees the protagonist getting into a car with the Empress, overhearing them talking about going somewhere, and then watches as the car drives away, leaving him tied up behind. Meanwhile, at a bar nearby, young Gu arrives and a waitress leads him to a table. He says he doesn't want to see anyone right now, but ends up spotting the protagonist lying on the ground, calling out his name. The protagonist says the army came and captured him, and that he won't last many days because he's gravely injured. Young Gu crouches down and asks if that's true, saying the protagonist better not be tricking him again. Laughing, Yui asks Gu Xiaonan what the hell is wrong with him today, and why he's reacting like that. The protagonist explains he was injured because of Miss Lin, as someone wanted to kill her. He continues saying the Liu family has joined forces with the army, and adds that if he dies, the only one who can protect her is Gu Xiaonan. Desperate, Gu asks if Lu Zhong wants to eliminate Xiaoqi, and if everything the protagonist said is true. Yui replies that there may be someone behind all this, but he doesn't know who it is. Gu stands up and tells the protagonist that he might deserve to die, but he won't let dear Xiaoqi suffer at the hands of the Liu family. He signals to the guards nearby, ordering them to come closer. As he walks out, he tells the protagonist to shut up, save his strength, and find a hospital. Meanwhile, he will show Xiaoqi who she truly should choose to be by her side. A few minutes later, the Empress appears, saying she never imagined the protagonist had such an ability to deceive people. The protagonist just smiles in agreement. Young Gu then arrives at Yun's residence, where she tells him he's very thoughtful for visiting her after she was discharged from the hospital. He asks how her recovery is going. She says she's fine now and adds that when there's intimacy between two people, awkward situations can happen. Young Gu, nervous, just agrees. She hands Gu a paper, saying the list of employers he asked for is there. He gets very excited and thanks her for it. She's also pleased with his reaction and asks why he still calls her sister Yun. He replies that to him, she's like a little baby. She then throws herself onto him and says she's leaving. A few hours later, the protagonist was waiting for young Gu in front of Yun's house. As Gu walks by, the protagonist grabs him, covering his mouth. He forces a pill into Gu's mouth and tells him not to panic, saying it's a secret tonic pill that will help him deal with his deficiency. Gu breaks free and asks if Yui shouldn't be in the hospital. Yui replies that modern medicine is so advanced he recovered quickly and that Gu doesn't need to worry about it. Furious, Gu says he knew the protagonist was lying to him and adds that he even made him call an ambulance. But Yui, staring at Gu seriously, asks if he's figured out who's behind everything. Gu turns away and says no, that nothing has been found. The protagonist grabs his arm and throws him to the ground. Gu asks if Yui has lost his mind. The protagonist takes a device from Gu's shoe and says he knows everything even without Gu saying a word. Yui recalls when Gu left the bar and planted that device in his shoe. Gu then remembers what happened moments earlier. He had been reading what was on the paper and says that Lin's brother is behind everything. Gu turns to Yun and asks if she's sure the list isn't wrong. She replies that only people make mistakes, not orders. The protagonist then shouts, asking if Lin Wei is responsible. Gu tries to reason with him, saying Lin Wei is not someone easy to deal with, and they should think before acting. Yui replies that he knows Gu wants to help, but if it's something simple, he asks him not to get involved because otherwise he'll end up dead. Distressed, Gu asks if Yui wants him to pretend he doesn't know anything, but the protagonist wastes no time and leaves, ignoring him, while Gu yells for him to answer. Gu punches the wall and shouts, "How dare you not obey me?" He adds that he'll wait for the day when Yui bows before him. Sometime later, in Lin Miaochi's office, the protagonist is on her laptop and finds some things. He reflects for a moment, realizing Lin Wei caused huge losses to the Lin family for no apparent reason, and that Lin Miaochi discovered this. This is why Lin Wei wants to get rid of his sister, so the position of leader won't pass to her. The Empress enters the room at that moment and says that after 2 brief fights, everything has become clear. She leans on the desk in front of the protagonist and asks why, as a mortal, he bothers trying to adjust. The protagonist replies that Lin Wei is important, but the key lies with the person behind him. He then asks why she's blushing. She raises one hand over his head and says she found the right solution for him. Looking at the Empress, the protagonist wonders if she's drunk and if this could be what he thinks. At that moment, he notices a mark on her shoulder. King Niang sits on his lap and says that finally, they've reunited. She continues, saying that last time she gave the protagonist a little checkup and found him very delicate, but now she's surprised he's rougher and clumsier. The protagonist asks what she intends to do. She explains that her soul was transformed into a spiritual weapon, and, through dark magic, was separated from her body and enchanted into a weapon. She continues, saying this wasn't done by the Empress, but rather that the Empress was the one who rescued her. King Niang remembers the past, when the Empress received the cauldron where her soul had been sealed for thousands of years. The Empress said she didn't need it, breaking the massive rare cauldron she had just received. At that moment, King Niang's soul escaped from the cauldron. Staring at the Empress, she thought her soul would dissipate at any moment since it was no longer inside a vessel. But the Empress, using all her refining techniques, absorbed the weapon soul technique that King Niang possessed. However, she also ended up absorbing all the resentment accumulated over thousands of years in King Niang's imprisoned soul, along with all the hatred hidden in the spiritual weapon. Trying to control the enormous resentment and hatred, the Empress was tempted to give up if she felt she couldn't bear the burden. Even so, she persisted, declaring that such a petty dark ritual was nothing to her. Back to the present, the protagonist asks if someone who carries a weapon soul also carries all the experiences and feelings of that soul. King Niang replies that he's very smart because not everyone could understand that. She adds that the Empress was kind to her and that when she had to make a choice before, she also wanted to know if the protagonist would have any objection. King Niang then takes the protagonist's hand and asks him to follow her. She shows him the medicinal items the Empress had collected from the trees earlier and says that with those items they can make a pill called Qing Yuan. If the protagonist wants to deal with the people behind everything, this pill will be very useful. The protagonist picks up the ingredients and says he doesn't know how to make elixirs. King Niang tells him not to worry because she's there to help. She then places his hand over the cauldron. Confused, the protagonist asks what that is. King Niang replies that this is the weapon she has carried for thousands of years, and even if it's not the original object, it can still be molded. The protagonist then pulls an object out from King Niang's body. She explains that this cauldron was made with a part of her soul, and even if it's not a real object, it will serve the young master's purposes. Holding the medicinal materials, she urges him to hurry and put them into the cauldron because she can't wait any longer. A few minutes later, the protagonist takes the pill out of the cauldron and asks if it's finished. King Niang confirms and says that one pill is enough. Seeing her out of breath, the protagonist asks if she's okay. She replies that she is, but using a bit of her soul power to make pills is rather exhausting. However, she ends up collapsing forward, and the protagonist catches her, helping her sit down. King Niang says she might need a short break. The protagonist answers that it's fine, and that she doesn't need to worry about it. Yui then throws the pill directly into his mouth, and instantly his body is overwhelmed by a powerful energy. He realizes he has reached the Master Realm and, confident, declares to Lin Wei that he's coming for him. At that moment, in the Lin family mansion, the uncle is shouting that if they fail, the plan to invest in distant mountains will be ruined. Lin Wei argues that investing in the martial arts examination is the most important thing right now. He adds that if no changes are made, they might as well sit back and wait for death. His uncle reminds him not to forget who the real head of the family is. At that moment, a woman walks into the room, asking the uncle to speak more kindly and suggesting they share a cup of tea. Lin Wei takes the tray, agreeing for his aunt's sake, but secretly slips something into one of the cups before handing it to his uncle, saying he'll reconsider the investments. The uncle then mentions Yui, saying that if nothing works, they can just give the position to him since he knows the Lin family well, and that would help. Lin Wei leaves the room silently, seething, thinking his uncle is still clinging to that worthless piece of land. Deep down, he wishes for his uncle's death so he can take control of the Lin family and revive it his own way. As he walks down the stairs, Lin Wei runs into young Gu, who says he's been waiting there for a long time and has something to discuss. Lin Wei approaches, asking if there's a good deal. Gu explains that Yui will soon come to handle this matter, but admits he wanted to arrive before the protagonist. Lin Wei replies that he considers Yui like a brother. Gu cuts straight to the point. Yui already knows everything. Lin Wei narrows his eyes and asks what he did. Gu answers that what he did doesn't matter, but Yui is important to both of them. Moments later, in a private room inside the Lin mansion, Lin Wei sits surrounded by two girls. One of his guards announces that Yui just stormed into the place. Lin Wei orders them to let him in. Turning to Gu, he says the information was spot on, and that the liquor was prepared specifically to welcome Yui. In his mind, Lin Wei is already plotting. Once he's done with the protagonist, he'll also crush this bootlicker Gu. Right then, the protagonist kicks the door open, declaring he has something to say to Lin Wei. He's startled to see Gu there. Smirking, Gu says Yui is about to die. Lin Wei tells Gu to use the secret exit behind him and says he'll handle things. At that moment, one of Lin Wei's henchmen fires at the protagonist, but Yui swiftly dodges the bullets, tearing through the guards as if they were nothing, knocking them all out effortlessly. Suddenly, Gu throws the cup of liquor at Lin Wei, knocking him to the ground. Confused, Lin Wei yells if Gu has lost his mind. Picking up an object from the table, Gu says that even though he hates Yui, he won't let Lin Wei escape. He remembers punching the wall earlier and winces in pain from his hand. Turning around, he finds the protagonist standing right behind him, asking what Yui plans to do. The protagonist says that if Gu really wants to contribute, there's something he can do. Gu grabs Lin Wei and growls that he'd never help him, especially after he ordered someone to hurt his precious Xiaokei. Lin Wei tries to explain, claiming he was tricked by a loser. He desperately begs Gu to get off him. At that moment, someone charges at the protagonist, but Yui dodges at the last second, grabbing the attacker's hand and saying, "You again?" The protagonist continues, stating that he asked Gu to deliver the message, but the intention wasn't to save Lin Wei. It was to lure this person out. He then demands to know who she is and how she knows Lin Miaoki, or rather, the Empress of the Demon Sect. And that's where we leave it. For more videos like this, don't forget to subscribe to the Frieren Manhwa channel. See you next time, my dear mages.